So today is the corporate engagement blueprint, transforming volunteer groups into high value partners. The guest that we've got today, well, when it comes to building corporate partnerships that actually scale, there's no better person to learn from really than those at the highest level. And I'm really, really pleased to introduce Mark Barnfield. Mark's going to be incredibly humble and probably feel uncomfortable by that intro, but Mark is part of the team for the Chicago event management team. And they are the wonderful people that put on not just the Chicago Marathon, but a huge number of events. The powerhouse event is obviously the Bank of America Chicago Marathon, but there's lots of other events that particular group is involved in. It's a feat of logistics, requires lots of hands-on, lots of partner management, lots of corporate partner management. And before Mark joined CEM, he honed his skills and the American Red Cross and a few other non-profits as well. So he's certainly someone that knows a thing or two about volunteer engagement, motivating people, and building partnerships. So Mark, hello, nice to see you. I hope I didn't embarrass you too much with that intro.
No, that's probably the nicest thing anybody's ever said about me, Martin. So thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it.
No,
delighted to be here.
You're very welcome. Mark, just very quickly, can you just give me a bit of background on where you've come in from? Obviously, I've given you that intro there, but for the people attending, just your role really. And
yeah, absolutely, happy to. Yeah, so I'm the Associate Director of Workforce Management at Chicago Event Management. I oversee the team that for our largest event, the Bank of America Chicago Marathon, we bring in about 11,000 people to support and assist. A lot of those are volunteers and volunteer groups. One of the most important groups there, of course, is our corporate partner and a group of volunteers that come in from there. Prior to that, I was with the American Red Cross and worked collaboratively with the fund development team there, engaging our corporate donors in volunteering to deepen their engagement in the mission. And then for 6 years before I joined the American Red Cross, I was a director of volunteer services with the Greater Chicago Food Depository, which is the food bank that covers Cook County, the largest county in Illinois. And again, very, very similar thing, engaging corporate partners in the mission there, sometimes kind of setting up large corporate volunteer days at their request. So they really wanted to kind of align with the mission and get themselves involved.
Yeah, great stuff, great stuff. Now, Mark's obviously going to welcome questions that come in as well. And the way that we've decided, we had a chat about this, and the way that we decided to approach this particular webinar is we both came up with a couple of themes and questions that we think are very pertinent around the corporate volunteering sector. And we're going to address those. We believe that those are some sort of pressing needs really from people like yourselves in your roles. But we're going to kick off with a poll. So I'm going to quickly, if I can, just launch this poll here. Hopefully you can all see this. What is your organization's single biggest challenge when managing corporate volunteer groups? And the answers that we've got on there are high dropout rates or last minute no-shows, finding enough opportunities to match corporate demand, managing the high administration burden, emails and spreadsheets, etc., gathering feedback and providing impact back to the corporate partner. So I'm going to give it, there's quite a few people on the call today. So we always get quite a lot of shy people that don't add their vote in, but I'm just going to allow just a minute or two while people start to complete these. I'm going to be very patient actually, because there is a fair number of people on the call. I think what's interesting straight away, Mark, is that there isn't a standout winner straight away, which just speaks probably to the overall challenge that corporate volunteer groups have. Let me just end the poll. No, nearly. I get so eager to make sure everybody gets a chance, but I'm going to just end it on this one. So end and share results. So hopefully you guys can see all of these results. Mark, can you see that too? Can you see what's come up on here?
You're on mute. Yeah. Yeah, no, I can see the poll results. Interesting, obviously, finding enough opportunities to match corporate demand seems to have run out as the winner there, which is, I think a challenge for a lot of people as more and more corporate organisations want to align with
Yeah.
non-profits in particular, and obviously, support missions in their local communities.
How would you have answered that a few years back, Mark, do you think, in the roles, particularly when you were at like the Red Cross and that?
So I think one of the big things that I've always seen is actually that first one, the high dropout rates, last minute no shows. One of the challenges with engaging corporate partners, particularly if you're doing it with an event that you're running during the work week,
Mm-hmm.
often you see that people's kind of responsibilities within their actual job kind of have to take priority, and so you see larger dropout rates than perhaps you do with other groups. And so that's always something I think to bear in mind and to try and manage. And also manage the expectations of the group when you're actually bringing them in. Quite often they'll promise to bring in 50 people, for example, and they show up with 20. And so as you're having that conversation, setting these things up, it's managing the expectations and saying, well, let's not shoot for 50, let's look at sort of 25. And, particularly if it's the first time that group has volunteered with you, working with them to manage expectations and keep what they can achieve to a reasonable level, so it doesn't actually have a hugely negative impact on the overall volunteer experience because they've come in well under what was anticipated.
So looking at the standout answer on there, the first topic that we wanted to talk about was, do you think that there are more volunteer programs looking for corporate volunteers than there are corporates looking for volunteer programs to be involved in?
So I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I think that when you've got a recognizable brand, like places I've been fortunate enough to work at, corporate volunteer or corporate organizations tend to kind of seek you out. I think if you are an organization that maybe doesn't have that strength of brand, then you have to go and seek those. There are always people that are looking to get involved. So many organizations want to have a volunteer day where they've got their employees out and supporting a wide range of different organizations. I think those are the opportunities for non-profits to kind of tap into and get themselves as part of those larger days. But I think it's very much dependent on your own brand and where you are as to how easy it is to attract partners and corporate volunteers in particular, as obviously those corporate partners like to align themselves with well-known organizations to help kind of promote their sort of corporate social responsibility.
Yeah. So let's play out like two scenarios then. Let's play out like you're a medium-sized charity. You don't really have a logo that brings the sort of like household name attention to a corporate. How would you go about starting those conversations with a corporate? Like, what could you get involved in? What sort of activities could you get involved in? And then how do you manage from the opposite side of that, like you said before, for like an enterprise thing where they are knocking on the door? What would you how would you manage those sort of two scenarios yourself?
So I think first of all, as you're looking at that as a sort of a medium-sized non-profit, so many organizations actually have on their websites pages dedicated to the missions and causes that they support. So doing some preparation work ahead of time to identify your local organizations that align with your mission is actually key to that. It gives you an easier in to do some outreach. Often on their website, there is somebody who's listed as their corporate social responsibility manager or even just directing through HR to begin with. But you have then a foot in the door because there's an alignment between that organization and the mission. There are lots of organizations that will have volunteer fairs essentially within their buildings, so that they're encouraging their staff to pick a course and a mission that is important to them. And so they'll bring people in to be able to talk to their staff about opportunities to get involved. And again, that's another great way to sort of get invites to those, is just by doing that outreach and being proactive, but doing the research ahead of time is really the key to success there.
You told me about that one before, the fairs, and I love that idea. I really do. And I don't think it would be always obvious that these corporates, even if you have a couple of head offices for very large organizations in your town, it wouldn't be obvious that they're even putting that stuff on. And I think that that's the reason, just to reach out to their HR team, right, straight away.
Yeah,
say, do you do
absolutely.
this, right? At least then you've got a date in the calendar that we can do this event with them.
Yep. And there is a need to sort of prepare yourself for a lot of no's along the way. But with an investment of time, you can definitely sort of start to build those relationships. And I've had experiences in the past where we've started with volunteer a foot in the door to get people volunteering, that then actually converted them into ultimately making financial donations as well. So
you mentioned something there that we didn't say that we were going to cover, but I'll put you on the spot a little bit. Really, is this worth the trouble for corporate volunteering?
So yeah, I do think so. I mean, it's an opportunity to get groups involved. There is always that potential with the right corporate partners that could turn into a donor if they're not already one. And so I think it's thinking about from a non-profit perspective, how do you align with your fundraising team and work on this as a joint strategy? And it's possibly the way that you kind of get somebody engaged initially through volunteering, and then convert them into a donor. Also, what you also see as well is some of the people who will come in as a corporate volunteer, really feel a passion and draw to the mission. They turn into a returning individual volunteer. So there's definitely benefit in a number of ways to invest this time.
Yeah, you've hinted before that you believe that there's a tendency for these volunteers to sometimes be a bit flaky as well, and lots of no-shows. If that is the case, is there a couple of tips that you could give our audience on, like, how do you mitigate that, or at least if it is going to happen, give yourself a backup plan?
Yeah. So yeah, as I said earlier, I think there's managing expectations up front as you're building relationships with, particularly with new corporate partners, and making sure that you are doing your bit to set them up for success. And rather than them over-promising the number of people they can provide, it's also having projects that are scalable as well. So with corporate volunteers that we bring into the food depository, as an example, we had projects that were basically taking bulk amounts of food, repackaging that into smaller amounts to then be distributed across the network of food pantries. And so that's the kind of thing that is scalable. You can do that with 10 volunteers, you can do that with 50 volunteers. And so those are the kinds of projects that when you do see that drop off, you can easily kind of switch that. You still create a really positive volunteer experience for the corporate partner. They have no idea that you scaled it back or increased it to meet the people that they bring in. So I think that's another key to success with this, is being able to adjust the projects that they're working on and be able to do it in a way where they have no idea that you just done that.
Yeah, good idea. Right, I'm going to do another poll. We've got our second poll on here. So let's launch this here. How do you currently measure the success of a corporate volunteer day? So I'm asking the audience at the moment, how do you currently measure the success of a corporate volunteer day? So it's tracking the number of hours, it's sending out post-event surveys to the corporate liaison. We rely on verbal feedback or a thank you email. Honestly, we don't systematically measure it, and there's no judging here if that is the answer. That's probably more common than you think as well. So as those are going in, everyone's flying in with votes on that. We've all got used to knowing how to use this now, which is great. And I'll just give it just a second. Okay, end and share results. Mark, can you see this? You okay with that?
Yep. No,
Yeah.
I can see this. Yeah, interesting set of results.
What jumps out at you, Mark?
So obviously the majority of people who have, or the leading answer for people here is that people aren't systematically measuring it yet, which I understand. I'm aware of, a number of organizations that don't do that for a number of reasons. Where I think it's personally beneficial to do it is it helps you be able to communicate to that partner the impact that they've had. And so that can be around the number of hours that they've produced. It can be around sort of the actual impact that they've had. So at the Red Cross, we would take groups out into people's homes to install smoke alarms. Home fire response is a big part of what the Red Cross does, as well as obviously the massive disasters that you see. Taking corporate groups out to install smoke alarms and being able to report back to them about the number of hours spent doing that, being able to tell them the number of smoke alarms that they had installed, the number of homes they'd made safer, the number of people that were now in a much better place. So I think statistically keeping this information is really great because it's a really good way of feeding that back. And then the corporate partners that you're working with can then obviously report that out to their teams and say, like, this is what you achieved in your local community. So I think it's an important thing to do, but it's also something that is quite time consuming. And so understandably that, a lot of people don't necessarily do that.
But if that's if that's what good looks like, and that's what the corporate partners, particularly at the higher end of it, are going to be looking for, what can we do to make that easier? Are there sort of tech solutions or something that you would suggest people look at?
Yeah, there are. I mean, there's lots of volunteer management platforms out there where you're able to get people registered ahead of time. It will record the hours that they have produced, and often with a lot of them, you can pull reports based on the group that's been in, confirm the number of people that were there, the number of hours that were invested, and then obviously just as some of the general tracking alongside of that can provide other statistics. At the food depository, as an example, we would always let every group know, how many pounds of food that they'd repacked and how many people that would go out to serve, and when that would leave the organization and ultimately kind of end up being available to people in the community, again, as a way of really rounding out the impact that people had and trying to take those statistics, a little bit above and beyond just, a recording of hours. While it's important because, of course, there is a financial aspect to working with volunteers, particularly if they're an existing corporate donor. Those volunteer hours allow you to do more with their donation than you can if you're doing everything with staff. So again, hugely important to kind of track that because it's a way of being able to report back on the overall impact, both financial and obviously from a volunteer hours perspective.
Yeah, and actually the last webinar I hosted was about gamification and how that's become a thing. And I don't think you can do gamification without decent reporting and data collection. You need to be able to track hours, and it might seem like quite a step for some organizations to feel like they're going to be going from spreadsheets and calendars to suddenly collecting all this stuff. But the modern day volunteer experience, I think particularly for the corporate environment too, is that recognition loop. So it is really important to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
I would imagine that you're going to hear the phrase gamification, particularly in the non-profit and voluntary sector, a hell of a lot more over the next couple of years or so.
Yeah, and I think my experience working with corporate teams, they tend to be a competitive bunch. So the more you can gamify something, the more they're likely to go after those targets and those goals.
So that actually ties neatly to the next question or the next topic we're going to talk about, which is we know how important the volunteer experience is to a successful program. How have you, Mark, kept volunteers engaged and making sure that they're having a good time?
I think, it's an opportunity to spend time with the people, really. It's there um, working on a particular project for you. It's investing the time to go and connect with them, meet with them, ask them why they're there. What is it about this particular, opportunity that got them to take some time away from work and come and join you and build those relationships. It's I think it's creating that sort of positive, environment of support and encouragement. I think often, thinking about the kinds of things you're asking your corporate partners to do as well as part of that. As I mentioned earlier, the Bank of America partners that we work with at the marathon and our other events, they tend to be the people that are handing out the medals at the finish line because that's a nice role for them to have. There's something really gratifying and satisfying about being able to do that. And so just being really intentional, because that's a way of keeping kind of people engaged. We have lots of roles, obviously, at those events, which are kind of tucked away and a little bit behind the scenes, but we prefer to put somebody like Bank of America in a role where they're really involved and engaged in the event itself rather than in more of a supporting role.
Yeah, we've developed a system where the non-profit that uses Rostify could offer a unique URL that gives them a landing page, which is fully branded up in, say, Bank of America in that instance, and get their own unique opportunities. That is a good way of sort of circumventing the admin, I think, that's involved in sort of saying, okay, don't offer that group of volunteer opportunities to the mass because that's for this group. And actually, some outside of corporate volunteering, some nonprofits do that anyway when they know they've got like their super volunteers. They're not, you shouldn't use the word favorites, but you've definitely got people of they turn up week in, week out, and they tend to be able to be allocated certain roles. They probably do it automatically just through habit more than anything else, but it's a way of standardizing that.
Yeah, and I think that unique link is a way of sort of creating sort of what feels like a bespoke experience from start to finish. It's giving that corporate partner the opportunity to sign up for something that is unique to them. It has their branding, it has their logos on it, and so it feels like it's a really important thing that you're stewarding them through with all their registration, as well as actually the experience when they're there and carrying out the project and completing that for you.
I think that is the key, right? Is making the corporate partner feel like, make them feel special, make them feel like a VIP. And if you're able to win them over head office side and also the people that arrive on the day, it's a double win that partnership keeps rolling on and they feel valued. And then also you have an opportunity that if somebody gets bitten by the bug that they love what you do, maybe even after they leave that organization, they might carry on volunteering. They might have a passion for it outside of the allocated day that the corporate volunteer program takes place. It might be, you know what, I'm doing this every Saturday morning now. But I think it starts with that understanding the corporate entity's motivations to align themselves with your particular organization and meeting them halfway and going, this is what we're about. And we know that you want to be about this too. And then offering them, even if it feels like a lot at first, offering them that complete experience that they need to feel valued. Would you say that's fair? Or
yeah, I would, and I think that sort of ties into what we were saying earlier about sort of managing expectations with new partners, and making sure that they're not over promising, but if you give a really positive experience to the 20 people that show up for the first time and have been stewarded through the registration process and had a really positive experience, the next time that corporate partner comes in, because their staff will have gone back and told their co-workers what a great experience it was, other people will then be motivated to sign up and join the group. And it's a really good way of then kind of building that relationship and increasing the engagement of that particular partner and expanding the group, and ultimately getting to that 50 people that they wanted to get to first time, but because you've helped manage their experience, you ultimately do that over a period of time, which is a much better experience for the partner themselves and for you as a non-profit or the organization that's really engaging them.
So let's close the loop all the way around now with this final topic that I wanted to talk about, which is like the feedback loop really for CSR. At the moment, Mark, what do you think the current expectations are for a corporate partner in terms of what they need back from a charity, a non-profit or volunteer program?
Yeah. I mean, impact, I think, is a big thing, as I was saying earlier. With certainly if you are working with a corporate partner who is currently a donor for your organization, fundraising teams, most fundraising teams will do an impact statement at the end of the year saying like, this is how much you donated, this is what we did with your donation, wrapping into that the amount of volunteer hours that were contributed. And I think currently the rate associated with a volunteer hour is about $36. It's somewhere around there.
Yeah.
So you can actually show on that impact report, the amount of additional revenue essentially that those volunteers have contributed to and how much further you've been able to kind of stretch that donation. So there's a lot that you can kind of roll up into that. I think the other thing is, quick social media posts, thank you to X organization for coming in and working with us today, and whatever impact measurement you've got there that they've executed whatever project, and giving them some of that and give them a boost, because then they can share that on their own social media, and again shows to the people that they're or that they're engaging with. It shows them obviously that they are a responsible, engaged organization who want to have an impact in their local community. So again, really easy win, but really highly valued by the partners.
Yeah, I like that. It feels like such a small thing that could be forgotten, but actually it's that level of recognition that lands really well with corporates.
Yeah, and I think it goes the other way as well. So if they're the ones that put a post out that says, we took a group and volunteered at this organization, a response to that saying thanks for coming in and acknowledging that impact goes a long way as well, even if you're not the one that's proactively putting it out there to begin with.
Great. Okay, so we covered most of the topics that we wanted to cover through that. Well, all of them actually, Mark. That was really, really good. I'm going to leave the floor open to anybody that wants to drop a question in the question box that's up there. While people are waiting, be shy and do that, I'll just quickly plug something else that we've got going on at the moment. So on the 19th of August, this is a little niche, this one, but I am excited about this. This is scale versus heart. So with the increase in the number of AI tools and automation that we all seem to be using for our day-to-day lives, a particular pressing concern that I'm noticing out in the voluntary sector is how do you automate and get the robots controlling everything without losing the human interaction and the human element? At the end of the day, that's the most important part. And so that's going to be a big topic really about AI and automations. And if you wanted to join that, it would be joining me and a couple of guests on the 19th of August. I don't see any questions in the question box, so I'm going to presume that we've covered everything there, Mark. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate that, and thank you everybody for joining us on this webinar covering corporate volunteer programs. This will be thank you, Sarah, a little heart emoji there. We'll be sharing this recording with all those that registered, and that's probably it from me. And thank you very much, Mark.
My pleasure. Delighted to be here. Thanks everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone.